So, welcome once more to the Forest Gene Conservation Association's American Beech Conservation Opportunities webinar. My name is Yarmila Bechka-Lee, and I'm a project manager with the FGCA. I'm joining you today from Mississauga, Treaty 13A lands. And I'd like to acknowledge that the lands which constitute present-day City of Mississauga as being part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and Wyandot nations. The FGCA is committed to respectful relationships and collaborative action in support of Indigenous knowledge, rights, and forest stewardship. I invite everyone to take a moment now and consider the lands that you are all joining from. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank the Invasive Species Centre and their supporting funder, the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, whose support has made this webinar possible. So we're so happy to see the huge diversity of people that are joining us today and joined us last week to learn more about beech diseases, beech bark disease and beech leaf disease, but also to discuss the opportunities around beech conservation. As many of you know, FGCA's Species Recovery Program has been working on the conservation and recovery of butternut and black ash for a number of years. But we are also well aware that there are other tree species impacted by invasive species, including American beech. So the conversations that we've been having with many of you this past year have highlighted not just the challenges and experiences around the management of beech in light of the effects of beech bark disease and beech leaf disease, but also the concerns and research into the conservation of beech for the future. So the intent of this second beech webinar that we're hosting is to delve a little bit more into some of the considerations and opportunities related to beech conservation from a variety of perspectives. So to get us started, I'm pleased to introduce Kerry McLaven, CEO of FGCA.
Great. Thank you, Yarmila. And a big thank you again to our funder and all of the individuals that we have connected with over the course of the year, giving us a true snapshot, or as I said last time, a tip of the iceberg in terms of the challenges that these two species have presented us in this province at this point in time. So the conversations we've had to date have certainly sparked a fire in our own team and many of our partners as we hope to continue this conversation. It's certainly an important one. In the meantime, I'm just going to give you a brief glimpse as to how this fits within the FGCA's work. So we are fortunate to be working alongside the brightest in the industry in research and conservation. And we do this with our mission and vision in mind. And we have recently revised it. So our vision is a genetically diverse, resilient forest landscape that supports life and a healthy economy. And our mission is clear and important and relevant than ever, supporting partners who are delivering programs both large and small across Ontario to ensure that genetic diversity is maintained as the foundation of a resilient forest. We as an organization are not a public-facing organization, but a practitioner-focused one, and all actions guided by a 5-year strategy. So obviously, even in the conservation and recovery space, you can't look at only 1 year snapshot. Our board and staff have recently updated our 5-year strategy, taking us to 2030, which recognizes the history of our roots in promoting source-identified, high-quality tree seed, but modernizing it for a climate-conscious, action-driven practitioner. The demand for it has never been stronger. We're going to be taking our long-standing species recovery programs that Yarmila mentioned and building strategies for reintroduction, getting trees back out on the landscape where they should be. And our work always is guided by research and, more importantly, almost collaboration, as well as fiscal responsibility as we navigate the coming years. So we do this work through four primary pillars that have remained unchanged in our current strategy. We have a commitment to species recovery of at-risk trees and trees in peril, those that aren't currently listed as species at risk. We're going to be continuing to support partner organizations, including conservation organizations, government, both provincial and federal, sustainable forest license holders, those managing crown lands, tree nurseries, and programs to increase that volume of high quality seed through our seed programs. Climate change adaptation is, absolutely necessary across all areas, including species at risk. And so we are going to be focusing on ensuring that climate change is integrated across programming. And even more importantly is continuing conversations, having sessions like this where we're sharing or creating opportunities for people that have experience to express that experience to others, keeping the conversations rolling, even under uncertain economic and environmental times. So under this initiative, the rapid spread of insects and diseases requires rapid and regular communication and knowledge sharing. But we take a grassroots approach to this. We connect the research with programs, people on the ground to ensure the practical application of some of the most advanced research available. Then time is not wasted. Building a recovery program, can't be done in 1 year. We can start it in a year, but it can be over 30 years in the making, like many other initiatives we start. So we have to start now. We have modern tree improvement tools and a strong history in tree improvement to help species at risk. So we can apply some of those historical tools to this problem. And whether it is supporting things that are already in motion, existing trials, monitoring programs, research, bioassays, restoration, we want to augment what's already been built so that we can not waste time reinventing the wheel. Just briefly, why beech? We know that this is a foundational late successional species, key wildlife mass producer, which we'll hear about today. It has been used by First Nation communities for food, oil, medicine, ceremonial purposes, and much more. And obviously, because of the diseases it has been impacted by, it has high conservation programming. We're also focusing on beech because species recovery is more effective when populations are larger. Larger populations have greater adaptive potential to environmental change as we have more individuals that possess traits suited for changing environments. While we have options, we can reduce inbreeding depression that could happen. While we have options, we might observe increased resistance potential, which you'll hear about today. And we can also improve reproductive success in our initiatives as greater genetic diversity leads to improved seed set, seed quality, and seedling survival. So we sincerely hope that you enjoy what you hear today. And for those that attended on March 4th, the content there, which will also be shared with the group. If you or your organization aligns with these messages and you want more professional development and genetic resource management content, we encourage you to consider becoming a member of the Forest Gene Conservation Association for only $50. We would be thrilled to welcome you to our group. And of course, if you are on any of the social media channels, we know a lot of people get their information that way. This is the kind of content that you're going to hear from us. Projects we're working on, successes, failures, challenges, all and everything in between. Please consider following along through our story. So with that, Yarmila, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Kerry. I would like to take this opportunity now to welcome our first speaker, Madison Sturba. Madison is the terrestrial invasives team lead at the Invasive Species Center, where she oversees a variety of projects, such as the training program and beech leaf disease monitoring network. Madison graduated from the University of Windsor with an MSc in biology and holds an honors BSc in behavior, cognition, and neuroscience. Welcome, Madison.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction. I'm just going to keep my camera off. I'm a little bit worried about connection issues just for people listening in. But happy to be here and talk about beech leaf disease. I know I was here last week too, so people that are attending both sessions, I did include new information throughout, but I still do touch on beech leaf disease background just for the people that are joining us new this week. But I do promise to mix some things up a little bit. So I'm with the Invasive Species Center, and just in case you aren't familiar with us, we're a not-for-profit organization that mobilizes action against invasive species that harm the environment, economy, and society. We do work really closely with a variety of experts and partners to deliver information that helps increase awareness about invasive species, but also build capacity to detect, respond to, and control invasive species. So let's get into beech leaf disease. It is suspected to be caused by an invasive nematode that feeds on beech leaf tissue. And these nematodes are microscopic, worm-like organisms that look like this. So they do feed on developing buds in the fall and spring, and this disrupts the normal leaf development. This nematode that causes beech leaf disease is thought to be a subspecies of Lidocanthus cornete, which is native to Japan. The nematode does cause similar damage and banding patterns on the Japanese beech, but it's native there, so it doesn't cause the same sort of things that we see here. All beech species in North America are susceptible to the disease, including American beech, which is our only native beech species, along with plantings of European, Chinese, and Oriental beech. Nematode feeding can cause leaf deformity in beech trees of all ages, but the young saplings and the understory can die as a direct result from this disease, usually within 2 to 7 years. It depends on a lot of different factors, but the older trees can take a little longer to show effects. This map shows the distribution of beech leaf disease based on the most up-to-date surveys in the US and in Canada. So it was initially detected in Lake County, Ohio in 2012. We can see that here in this pale yellow color. And since then, it has spread throughout the states, a good portion from Michigan down to North Carolina. We can see a new detection as of last year, and then up and over into Maine. And then it was first detected in Ontario, Canada for the first time in 2017 in Elgin and Norfolk counties, and then it's kind of spread throughout southern Ontario. Everything in green on the map shows the native range of beech trees in North America, so we can compare where it's at with where else it can go. Nematode DNA has been found beyond the range of the disease that we see here in Ontario. So there have been cases where a tree is tested positive for nematode DNA, but it isn't showing signs of beech leaf disease yet. So there's more research that's needed in that space, but it does suggest that the disease could keep spreading further in our province. And here we can zoom into Ontario specifically just to see where it's been spreading, mostly in southern Ontario, like I mentioned. And there have been new detections ever since its initial discovery. So you can kind of see the leading edge of the disease here. So beech leaf disease is spreading, but why should we care? We already heard a little bit about the benefits of beech trees, and I'm sure you're already familiar with them, but they are a shade-tolerant late successional species, providing a ton of different benefits. They provide a food source for 40 wildlife species like black bears, deer, birds, and small mammals. The high protein and fat content of the seeds are particularly important for blackberry production and survival. On the economic front, beechwood is used in a variety of ways, like in flooring, furniture, railway ties, pulp, and firewood. And then socially, just some examples would be that they do provide crucial ecosystem services like many other tree species. So they play a role in preventing erosion, nutrient cycling, carbon sequestration, and they also just have intrinsic value too, and they enhance the natural beauty of the outdoors. So how are nematodes infecting beech and moving this quickly across the landscape? So these nematodes do invade the beech buds from midsummer into the autumn where they feed and overwinter. They feed on the bud tissue, damaging leaves on a cellular level, and that damage is evident in early spring as leaves emerge fully symptomatic. So they do tend to spread with the help of rain, wind, and potentially other arthropods like caterpillars. That's kind of how they spread locally. And since they move in water films, the wet springs can really create ideal conditions for nematode reproduction and spread. And then the long distance spread of the nematodes is usually with the help of human activity, just as the case with all invasive species, particularly here with the movement of infected plant material like nursery stock. So the early symptoms of beech leaf disease are these dark green stripes or bands between the veins of the leaves. The vein tissue is just too thick for the nematodes to cross, so that's why you see damage in the form of bands. And these bands can be easier to see if you take the leaf and hold it up to a light source like the sun if you're outside. So here in these pictures, you can see the bands just starting to form, but you can see much clearer banding here in these pictures. These leaves have been infected for longer, so we're seeing some more striping and leaf damage. You can see some more severe symptoms in these pictures, so it's common for leaves to start to thicken and they'll feel leathery or puckered over time. You may also notice the leaves turn yellow and start to curl or crinkle. And then as the disease progresses, the trees produce fewer leaves, so the canopy can thin over time. And the canopies can also become thinner just because infected trees can shed those leaves earlier in the season. European beech trees and American beech cultivars with dark foliage can also develop the leaf striping, but it can sometimes be a little bit more difficult to see. The bands just aren't as eye-catching here, but you can see some of those raised areas. This is another example of variation in band color. So sometimes bands will appear green, yellow, or brown. You can see some of the swelling in the bands here, which is caused by that nematode feeding. So beech leaf disease does cause an abnormal rate of cellular division, which means we get an increase in cell size and thickness. And all those new cell layers can increase leaf swelling. And that swelling is really thought to be an advantage for the nematodes. It kind of just helps them access resources easier and feed better. So we've seen a lot of variation in how beech leaf disease can look, but I just wanted to note that the symptom progression we're seeing here is not over the course of a single growing season, but it is over the course of years as those nematode populations increase. So as those population sizes grow, there'll be more and more feeding in the buds, with more obvious symptoms appearing each subsequent spring. The bands and damage basically remain the same throughout the year, and then you'll just see increased damage from that increased activity the following season. Beech leaf disease is a relatively new disease on the landscape. It's been here for about 9-ish years, which seems like a long time, but it's really not when you compare it to the length of time that we've known about other species, like emerald ash borer, for example. It's been here for about 20 years, and Dutch elm disease, and it's been here for about 80 years. So because beech leaf disease is so new, there's still a lot of ongoing research to better understand how we can prevent its spread here in Canada. We do have some general recommendations, though, that can kind of be used to help protect a beech, and hopefully with time and more research, we'll have some other suggestions as well. So the first thing you can do is to clean your boots when leaving an area with beech, especially if you know there are symptomatic trees nearby. It'd be easy just to carry a little boot brush with you or keep it in your car, for example, and then just clean off your shoes after the hike, just to kind of remove anything that could be there, any kind of nematodes. Boot brush cleaning is really good practice in the invasive species world just in general, because you could be carrying other things like invasive plant seeds, for example, on your shoes. So boot brush can help get rid of that. The other recommendation we have is to not move materials that could be contaminated with the nematode. So don't move beech seedlings, leaf litter, or firewood. Beech leaf disease can also move on nursery stock, so any beech stock should be carefully examined before you purchase and plant. Another recommendation here is to try to reduce tree stress if possible. Trees that are already stressed by drought or poor soil conditions or other factors in urban environments can show accelerated decline. So try to focus on enhancing the overall health of beech trees. You can do that through proper care, like watering during dry periods, for example, and avoiding root damage. The last thing I'll mention here is to simply stay informed on new research or best management practices. Hopefully, as new information comes out, there's new things that we can do to better protect beech trees. There is one treatment available here in Canada now against beech leaf disease that I wanted to quickly highlight. The Pest Management Regulatory Agency did approve the emergency use of Arborprotect 20S, which is a fungicide and nematicide. It's already been used here as a fungicide in the management of Dutch elm disease, but now it can be also used to treat beech leaf disease. So it's just a product that'd be injected into trees that are already symptomatic every 2 years. And right now, this registration is in effect until July 3rd, but hopefully we're able to extend that label. If you do use this treatment and find success, please feel free to reach out to us and we can pass that information along to those who work on those registrations. It can really help build a case for future registrations and future types of products that are become available. Because there's still so much to learn with beech leaf disease, we did start a beech leaf disease monitoring network we run in coordination with the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources. There's a few different goals of this program. So overall, we do aim to increase awareness and detection of beech leaf disease, especially along those leading edges, increase reporting through EDMAPs in Ontario, and I'll talk about EDMAPs a little bit more later, identify gaps in beech leaf disease reporting and support current research efforts, train community members in sample collection to increase information on distribution and spread of beech leaf disease. So we do this in a number of ways. We have fact sheets, species profiles, ID cards, and posters. We also host in-person and online training. And the last thing I'll mention here is to engage youth in environmental stewardship. So beech leaf disease is a relatively easy pest to identify, so it's a great one to get younger people out and looking for and get them involved with. So right now we have just over 220 people sign up to be part of our beech leaf disease monitoring network. We invited network members to attend a training workshop last year in Brighton, which is close to the known leading edge of the disease. So people got to learn more about what to look for in that area. And we even went out to a local park to see the impacts of the disease firsthand there. Anyone interested in volunteering to help support research efforts were mailed kits to collect leaf samples. We are interested in collecting leaf samples through this network for a variety of reasons. So, for example, it can help confirm new locations and track how the disease is moving across the province. It can help improve spread models, and it can help provide materials for research. So, for example, leaves can be used to compare infections across different regions. It can also be used to look at different vectors of the disease. So this is what the kits looked like. They're super simple. It was just a sampling protocol that we attached, a field ID card with a carabiner, plastic baggies for the leaves, an ice pack to keep those samples cold, and a return envelope so that the leaves could be shipped back to the lab. This is what the ID card looks like a little bit more closely. It's just a good tool just to keep in your car and reference when you're out working or hiking around for, what to look for. Municipalities and conservation association authorities also had the option of receiving yard signs to put at trailheads to increase beech leaf disease awareness and reporting in the area. So I think we sent out about 80 signs. The red dots here are some of the places we received samples back from. So mostly in Southern Ontario, we probably got back around 50 leaf samples from different areas. We'll be doing a call for volunteers again soon. So if anyone's interested in participating, you can reach out to me directly. The leaves go right to the M&R lab to help support their work on beech leaf disease spread. The samples are, again, like I said, also really good in confirming new locations of the disease, especially along the leading edge. So if you're anywhere in the outskirts of where it's been found so far, we're particularly interested in your reports and leaf samples. The biggest call to action right now is to report invasive species and to report beech leaf disease. There are a few different ways to do that. So the first is EDMAPS, which stands for the Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System. It's a great tool to report just all types of invasive species, and it shows the real-time tracking of invasive species that are all verified by experts before they're uploaded to the site. So this is kind of what the maps look like. They're not an exhaustive map of everywhere a particular species is found, but it is a really good starting place. They're all public reports, so the more people that use this platform and make reports, the more accurate these maps become. So we can see that a lot of the public reports right now have been concentrated in Southern Ontario. There's also iNaturalist was a really great for reporting. It's really great for nature enthusiasts. It lets you report both invasives and native species. And iNaturalist and EDMAPS are connected on the back end too. So if you have a report to one, it usually gets uploaded to the other. We've actually done reporting contests through iNaturalist before where people will join the reporting campaign and then just by submitting reports of beech leaf disease, they're automatically entered for a chance to win a community science prize pack. So we'll likely be doing something similar to that again this year. So stay tuned for more info on that. If you do prefer to chat to someone personally too, you can also call the invading species hotline. Reporting invasives is super important. Community scientists and people working on the ground are usually the first ones to find new invasive species and make that first report. Oftentimes they'll otherwise go unnoticed. So really important to make those reports. It can help with increasing early detection. It can also lead to rapid responses, and in this case, help us better understand the spread of beech leaf disease. We do have some other beech leaf disease content coming soon. We have an invasive species training program that offers virtual self-paced courses for anyone wanting to learn more about the impacts of invasive species in their community or workplace. We do currently have 6 courses available, but a 7th all about beech leaf disease will be available in the next few weeks. So please sign up on our website to receive updates on the launch of this new course. And that course will be free. If you want to learn more about beech leaf disease or other invasive species, then feel free to check out our website. We have tons of different species profiles, fact sheets, best management practices, newsletters, and more. We also have a monthly webinar series where we invite experts to come and talk about invasive species issues, research, and management. Our webinar next month in April will actually be all about disease resistance and invasive species, and our speakers will be touching on the resistance work happening in the States. So you can also sign up for that on our website. If there are any other resources that you think would be really useful that we don't have, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to get something like that developed too. And that's it for me. Feel free to reach out anytime. Here's my email. Always happy to chat. And thanks so much for listening.
Thank you so much for that great presentation, Madison, and in general for the great work that the ISC is doing to educate and keep everyone aware of what's happening with invasive species. We do have a question for you, so I would also encourage anyone else, if they have questions, to pop them into the chat. So comment and question for you. Great to see the use of the public to help determine the spread of beech leaf disease. Is there a surveillance or research project to look for the nematode DNA in eastern, central, and northern Ontario so that we can predict the spread into areas outside of current infections? And there's a second part to that, is where are the samples being collected?
So for us, we just have been doing general volunteer call out. So really, wherever you are, if you're interested in supporting, please do and submit samples. It would be great to target more areas that are outside of Southern Ontario to see how far those nematodes are really spreading. I do believe that Sharon Reed was looking at other areas and where those nematodes are spreading. She's the one that has done research on finding positive nematode DNA elsewhere. So I think there are things kind of in the works, but yeah, if you are outside of Southern Ontario and you want to help us and submit some leaf samples or sign up for the program, really encourage you to do so.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Madison? Oh, okay, good. So there is some collection happening. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thanks, Eric, for adding that.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions for Madison, I would like to thank you once again for the ISC's kind support in our beech work and for helping bring these beech webinars to the public and to have this great conversation with so many different people. So thank you again, Madison.
Thank you.
So moving on to our next speaker, I would like to introduce Nick LaBonte, who is the regional geneticist with the USDA Forest Service, Region Number 9, where he provides guidance to national forest resource managers on genetic aspects of reforestation and species conservation, in addition to ensuring the appropriate genetic makeup of seed provided to national forests from the Oconto River seed orchard. Nick earned a BSc in Forest Ecology and Management from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and an MSc and PhD degrees in Forestry and Genetics from Purdue University. So over to you, Nick.
Thanks for the introduction. All right. Good to see everyone on the call here today. I'll get my presentation up here and get started. All right. Yeah, I'm a geneticist for Region 9, or the Eastern region. So beech is a species that we have worked on in a conservation genetics and resistance breeding context in our region. So I'll just go over what we've done in the past and a few thoughts for the future at the end of my slideshow here. So, and I'll just say much of this is the work of the previous geneticist who was in this position, a guy named Paul Barang, who retired in 2019. So fortunately, he left a lot of good records and pictures of what he worked on, so I could kind of put this presentation together. So this is the Eastern region, or Region 9. It composes a large number of states, and what you could kind of say is like the northeast quadrant of the United States. Shares a long border with Ontario through the whole Great Lakes, as well as Quebec and New Brunswick. Most of our forests are in the Great Lakes, and with a few in kind of the Appalachian Mountains and outlying highlands, and then a few, way down in Missouri, farther south. So this is a range map of beech. Here is outlined in red, with blue and green kind of pixels based on our forest inventory and analysis data set, which is the long-term monitoring plots that are followed by the research branch of the U.S. Forest Service to look at forest change over time. Generally here, the dark blue are the grid locations where beech is most numerous in these monitoring plots, and then going down to light green is areas where beech is present but less common. So you can see some of our biggest national forests in this region are outside of beech's native range, but there is a lot of overlap here between the national forest land base and the eastern region's forests. Or I mean, the range of American beech, sorry. Okay, so my predecessor, Paul, as I mentioned, started working on beech largely because of beech bark disease. So beech bark disease is caused by kind of an interaction between a scale insect and a couple of species of Neonectria canker-forming fungi. So the scale insect creates kind of the white powdery appearance on the affected beech trees during the early stages of infestation that you can see in kind of the lower left there. And then over time, cankers will form on the trunk, and you'll see some crown thinning, tree decline, and in a lot of places, large-scale death of mature beech trees. So this is an older map. It's from 2015. I would say, I mean, beech bark disease has largely spread throughout most of the range of beech, or at least the areas where it's common in the eastern region, including some of those far western areas in Wisconsin and Michigan that I work a lot with. I would say mortality is not universal throughout the area where beech bark disease has been detected in the region. Some parts of our region are more affected with others. Generally, places with the highest density of beech tend to see the greatest effects. So what the forests I'll talk about that were mainly involved in the beech project in Region 9 are highlighted with the blue boxes here, the Green Mountain, Allegheny, Monongahela, and Hiawatha. I'll kind of go through them each individually and talk about what we did on those forests. And the key facilities for propagating and screening beech for beech bark disease resistance are the Oconto River Seed Orchard, which is way out on the western edge of beech's native range in northeastern Wisconsin there, and then the Forest Science Laboratory in Delaware, Ohio, which is part of the Forest Service research branch. So our agency is organized. We have the National Forest System, which I'm part of, that's all about managing the land base, and then we have a research branch that does more forestry research, and we collaborate with a lot on, especially on these invasive pests and disease resistance breeding and genetics. So the Delaware, Ohio facility is part of the research branch, and it is confusing. I might refer to it just as Delaware later in the talks, because that's what I talk about. It is not the state of Delaware. It is a town named Delaware in the state of Ohio. So, all right, we'll talk about the Hiawatha National Forest first, because although it's way on the northwest extreme edge of Beech's native range, the Hiawatha was actually one of the first forests to sort of approach the regional genetics program about uh, working with beech in the context of developing a beech bark disease resistant seed source. So here's the Hiawatha, way on the northwest edge of its range. It's very cold there, but the climate is moderated somewhat by Lake Michigan and Lake Superior being adjacent to the forest, kind of preventing some of the um, summer heat and winter cold extremes that limit beech's range in the western lake states. So here's a nice beech on the Hiawatha National Forest, and this is actually a very new picture. This is from October of this year. So you can see this very nice beech in the foreground here, and then you can actually see a big beech snag in the background, a couple other dead beech trees, a lot of sugar maple in the canopy, and then a lot of young beech sprouts in the understory, kind of mixed with sugar maple. And this is sort of what the post beech bark disease forests on the Hiawatha look like in general. And beech is a very important component of the late successional forests here. Not only does the loss of the beech canopy caused sort of a loss of the ecosystem services associated with beech for the Hiawatha, which, the hard mast and all the other nice things beech does for the ecosystem. The dense mat of beech resprouts and seedlings that has developed in the aftermath of beech bark disease is a problem in and of itself because it's very shade tolerant. The sprouts never get very big because they're all kind of too close together and continue to be affected by scale. And actually can inhibit regeneration of other hardwoods. So we also have sugar maple, yellow birch, hemlock, and other species that tend to get kind of lost under these mats of young beech. So it's a high priority for this forest to do something about beech bark disease. So starting way back in 2002, our forest genetics and resistance breeding researcher, Jennifer Cook, who's there in the pink hard hat, from Delaware, Ohio, developed this great screening method to kind of do field testing of beech trees to see if they're really resistant or not, or if they've, just kind of gotten lucky. So it turns out the resistance mechanism for beech bark disease is really not, it doesn't have that much to do with the Nectria fungus or the neonectria. It actually, the trees that show resistance in the field actually are able to suppress the scale insect that attacks the tree. So the resistance test is really a scale resistant test. So I'll refer to them as like BBD resistant beech in shorthand, but what they really are is scale resistant. So the test involves, identifying the foresters on the Hiawatha identified stands where there were still some large, healthy beech trees in the midst of lots of dead mature beech trees of similar size. They would then flag those candidate trees that might be resistant, also some control trees that didn't really seem to be resistant, but were still alive in the same stands. And then the researchers would take these pads, which you can kind of see in the left picture there, that had a bunch of scale insect eggs, or I forget if it was eggs or nymphs. I think it was eggs. But then they would kind of tie that pad onto the beech trunk. And the scale insects would hatch, and they'd kind of latch onto the tree and start feeding. A resistant tree will be able to resist the feeding of the scale insects. So when you take the pad off in a year, the bark will be relatively clean underneath, whereas a susceptible tree will have, a raging scale insect infestation under the pad. So this was really cool because it was a way to sort of do resistance testing in the field without having to go through this long propagation and process to get material to screen. And only the trees with sort of this verified scale resistance were moved forward for grafting. So on to the next step. Next step of the program, how do we propagate these trees by grafting? Well, not a lot of tree nurseries in the Lake States and in the United States in general grow the sort of small bare root beech trees that we needed for rootstock. Um, beech is grown in the nursery trade, obviously, but it tends to be more of kind of large size material for ornamental purposes. Anyway, the easiest way was to grow our own rootstock. So here's some beech nuts and little baby beech trees germinating at the O'Connell River Seed Orchard in 2013. And so, but rootstock was grown at both locations. So it was grown at O'Connell River and at Delaware. I think Delaware was later on, but and then okay, once the seedlings are big enough, then we can start grafting our selected parents. So getting a branch from the top of these confirmed scale-resistant beech trees during the winter, uh, uniting it with the rootstock. The researchers in Delaware, Ohio, also figured out that this hot callus grafting system is what worked best for beech. So hot callus grafting, your you do it in a cold space, so it's in like you can see it's in like a poly hoop house in the winter, so it's pretty cold in there. The scion is dormant, the rootstock is dormant, and then you run these pipes to heat just the area around the graft union, and it's insulated with foam here. So heating up just the graft union, that tissue wakes up and starts healing itself before the rootstock and the scion wake up. Anyway, it's a little more complicated than some other kinds of grafting, but it worked pretty well. After a few years in the greenhouse, these grafted trees were planted in the field at the O'Connell River Seed Orchard. The seed orchard it's a facility that's about 700 acres. It has a big deer fence around it. We do have a lot of space for tree plantings there. So I think the beech planting was about 2 acres. And the grafting of these trees from the Hiawatha started around 2010 and continued through 2020 and later expanded to be kind of a partnership with other entities in Michigan, like Sleeping Bear Dunes National Park, who had also identified some scale-resistant beech trees on their land base. All right, so looking east, we're going to move over to the core of American Beech's native range and talk about 2 of our kind of central Appalachian forests here, the Allegheny in Pennsylvania and the Monongahela in West Virginia. Both of them pretty much correspond with 2 of the highest density beech areas in their respective states. There's a lot of beech in both of these locations. The Allegheny is a plateau. Rather than being in the mountains proper, it's kind of an outlying plateau. It's cooler than the surrounding areas, and beech is an important component of music stands there. So it looks like a lot of the mortality on the Allegheny at that point was on in 2000, it kind of spread from the northeastern part of the forest. Again, like on the Hiawatha, foresters identified stands that had a lot of beech and had some surviving trees. Here you can see they marked the stands and the little individual beech trees that were going to be tested. Scion from these was collected in 2010. So this really started about the same time as the Hiawatha. This was more of a cooperative with the state of Pennsylvania. And the orchards that resulted from this grafting were not actually planted on national forest land at all. There were 3 separate plantings at different state-managed locations in the state of Pennsylvania. And here we see Paul Barang again in the red jacket shooting down some scion. And then that's Kerry Sweeney, who retired a couple of years ago. She was a seed orchard manager at O'Connell River at that time. So back in 2010. All right, so here's some nice grafted beech trees. You can see their little graft unions. The scion was all dipped in wax, which is why it's so thick and light colored and weird looking to prevent moisture loss. But these are some of the grafted beech trees that were put together at O'Connell River for the Monongahela National Forest. which has big elevation changes, includes some very high ridges within the central Appalachian Mountains, even some, native red spruce and cool stuff like that. Beech, again, important part of the music forest there. And these trees were identified slightly later, 2012 and 13, screens roughly 2015 through 2017, and then grafted a little bit later, 2016 to 2018. And a lot of the rootstock for this grafting project came from Delaware, Ohio, because we try to get more of a match, kind of a local climate match for the rootstock. So we don't really want to be using northern Wisconsin beech genotypes if they're going to be planted in West Virginia, because the soil and the climate's totally different. And we just want to try to keep things as local as possible with the rootstock. But this will be important later. So stay tuned. All right. So that's the Monongahela. Again, same story. Our foresters identified these stands with surviving beech that are marked with little yellow crosses there. Those were tested, and the winners were selected for grafting. Finally, we'll move up to Vermont, another forest in the mountains, the Green Mountain here, with a lot of beech. Again, resistant beech were located. The resistant candidates were identified and tested around 2015 or slightly thereafter, so about the same time as the Monongahela. But unlike the other forests, we never got around to propagating the trees from the Green Mountain, and none of our cooperators did either. So, final list of plantings resulting from these beech efforts, which is really a pretty long project. I mean, it started around 2002. There was the seed orchard clone bank from the Hiawatha National Forest, had about 35 clones. Some clones were also shared with Michigan Tech University, which is in the Upper Peninsula. This planting, it did pretty well. It was plagued by damage from late frosts. So Oconto River seed orchard's more of an inland climate versus the Hiawatha. It tends to get these warm-ups in spring that will cause things to flush, and then there's typically around the end of May, there's usually one last big cold front that causes frost damage. So even though it wasn't that huge of a seed movement distance, this planting did kind of struggle due to the climate difference between northern Wisconsin and the eastern Upper Peninsula of Michigan. In Pennsylvania, there were 3 separate plantings, and as of 2024, when I talked with the Pennsylvania folks about this, one of them is doing quite well, and 2 are in rather poor condition. It's beech. Beech doesn't always do super well planted in open grassy areas. So unfortunately, butternut, another species I work with, does tend to do very well in those situations, and beech not always. The West Virginia seed orchard, part of it was planted around 2015, and then some more were planted in 2022. So now, and because I don't have too much time, and this was included in the last presentation, the exact same map, beech leaf disease came onto the scene kind of in the middle of this project, first detected in 2012 and 2013 in Northeast Ohio, kind of when this grafting and propagation effort was already in full swing. So in the early 2020s, the staff at the lab in Delaware, Ohio, which is really just north of the word Ohio on this map. So not even in an area where you can find beech leaf disease in the wild, but they did have a relationship with an arboretum in Cleveland, which was much closer to the epicenter, kind of in northeastern Ohio. Anyway, some of the beech at the Delaware lab did test positive for the presence of nematodes, although there were no symptomatic trees, and a small number of trees at Oconto River that were growing in the greenhouse that were grafted on rootstock that had been grown at Delaware, Ohio, also tested positive in early 2022. So that's unfortunate. Anyway, here's an old snapshot of where beech leaf disease was when this was all kind of happening. It was not in West Virginia or Wisconsin at that point. though we can see it's kind of moved into West Virginia now. So yeah, okay, I did reproduce that map here. All right, so what were the results of this beech leaf disease problem? And in the end, unfortunately, because the West Virginia grafts planted in 2022 had been in the same greenhouse as some trees that tested positive, that whole planting was destroyed in 2022 at the insistence of the state of West Virginia. And to be extra safe, the planting of material from the Hiawatha in Wisconsin was also removed because we didn't want to spread beech leaf disease to Wisconsin. So as a result, not much remains from this beech bark disease resistance effort in terms of grafted trees or seed orchards. One of the Pennsylvania plantings seems to be doing pretty well. There are some trees in Michigan planted by Michigan Tech University. So there are still some out there, but kind of the core plantings were kind of got messed up by the arrival of beech leaf disease onto the scene. So what about the future? I mean, the Hiawatha National Forest, I talked to a lot, and they are still hoping to develop a beech bark disease resistance beech source. Because these parent trees are actually resistant to scale, like they are still out there. Most of them are still healthy and producing material that could be grafted. The tricky part is it's a pretty long timeline with the demands on the growing space, having to produce our own rootstock, and the continued uncertainty with beech leaf disease makes it hard to invest additional effort right now. How do we manage the beech leaf disease risk? I mean, there would always, you could test for it, but then there would be the continued danger for, having to destroy a bunch of grafted material if you did identify it again, which could always happen. And is it worth it to pursue beech bark disease resistant beech when there's no evidence that those trees are also resistant to beech leaf disease? Should we start propagating all these trees again if we don't really know if they're resistant to the new disease that's on the scene? Now, I think, eventually beech leaf disease is probably going to spread throughout the entire range of American beech. And then, maybe we'll be able to identify some surviving candidates that could be resistant to both. You would expect them to be a lot less common. But anyway, that's sort of the outcome of our program here in the Eastern region. We do still have this great database of known resistant trees out there in the woods. It's just we do not have any seed orchards currently. So that's what I got. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Nick. That was sounding so great until the last few slides. Please, everyone, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. Okay, so we have one coming in. Looking at the slides showing the collection of scions in the winter in Hiawatha, can you describe what tool is used and how it is used? It didn't look like a gun.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know why they weren't using a gun here because Paul prided himself on his marksmanship and liked to use the guns when he could, but we're not allowed to if it's too close to a major road. So this is probably a tree that was like right next to a campground or another developed area, and we couldn't do shooting. So this is a big shot, arborist slingshot. So it's just it's 4-foot fiberglass poles that lock together in this gigantic slingshot on the end. And it was developed, it's made for arborists to set climbing lines. Like you send up a skinny, lightweight line first with a beanbag full of like lead shot. I'm surprised I don't have one laying around. I usually have one on my desk to show people. But then once that light line goes up there, you can then tie on a heavier line, send it up, and that's your like safety line. If you've got it over a sturdy limb high in the canopy, you can start climbing. For genetic stuff, it's a little different. You do still get the beanbag over the branch, with the light slick line. Then you tie on a heavier rope that is attached to a rope saw, which is just this flexible, it's like a two-sided chainsaw blade kind of that's connected to the ropes. And then you'd snake that up into the canopy and use it to cut off your target branch. So, yeah, thanks for the question.
Okay, we have another question for you, Nick. This was asked in the previous session as well, but we are interested in your experience. Are root suckers getting to reproductive age, or is the scale affecting them before they can produce seed?
I I think there are cases where they do get to reproductive age, but what we see in places like the Hiawatha is it and the Allegheny too, although I didn't get into that as much, but it tends to form just this sort of suppressed shrub layer.
Mm.
And yeah, the thinking is that the scale is continuing to affect those and preventing them from getting big.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Nick? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Nick. This was really interesting. And, coming from an organization that does a lot of grafting and seed orchards, it was really interesting for me to hear about your perspective on this and your experience.
Yeah, for sure. And hey, some of these beech trees could be good, with the future climate in Ontario. Maybe you would want some of these Pennsylvania or uh, Michigan accessions. So always happy to work with you guys. And thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Okay, so thank you again, Nick. And moving on to our next speaker, I'm very happy to welcome Jeremy Inglis, who worked for the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and was the provincial coordinator of human-wildlife interactions and the Bear Wise program until his retirement in 2024. Jeremy has worked extensively with black bears over 35 years, both in a human-bear conflicts role as well as research capacity studying adult male bears in Algonquin Park. Jeremy played a key role in the development of the Bear Wise program in 2004 as a member of the bear handling team, developing various policies, response protocols, and training standards. He was also lucky enough to assist a number of times in the Southern Hudson Bay polar bear study conducted in the early 2000s by Dr. Martin Obard. Needless to say, Jeremy is passionate about bears. And with that, I will hand it over to Jeremy.
Thanks, Carmela. Okay, let's see if we can get this PowerPoint going here. Okay, can we see that?
We can see your screen, and yeah, and it's coming into presentation mode.
Okay, we're
Just a
good.
bit of a delay. There we go. All set.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me, folks. I don't know if I can continue on with after hearing Nick's talk, but let's stay positive and hope for the best for the future. So this is a bear's future without beech trees. So we'll talk about just how significant beech trees are to black bears and other wildlife. And I just like to start with this little slide at the beginning. It's not beech trees, but you'll see in the mouth of this bear are some blueberries. And a colleague, Cassandra Moore, took this picture, her and her husband, south of the French River. And it's just a great picture. to illustrate some natural foods. So let's start in the fall of the year, just prior to denning. So this is a female, and assuming she's an adult female, at least 5 years of age, she would have been bred that previous spring. Mid-June to mid-July is when the breeding season. And there's a marvelous adaptation known as delayed implantation. So she'll breed with a male or multiple males, and the fertilized egg floats free in the uterus until such time as she's put on enough weight to sustain herself and produce offspring. So a marvelous biological adaptation says, okay, you're large enough to survive yourself and to produce offspring. And it's only at that time that the fertilized egg implants and the active gestation occurs. So in this part of the scenario, that would be generally about 160 pounds or 70 kilograms. That's about the magic weight females will have cubs. So the cubs are born in the den in mid-January. So the active gestation occurs just as I said around mid-October during denning, just prior to denning. The cubs are born in the den in January. They emerge with her the following spring and spend that entire summer with her until the next fall when they all den together again. And when they emerge in the spring, the yearlings at that point will become independent, kicked away from their mothers at 17 to 18 months old. So a female will only produce every second year at best, and only if she's obtained enough food. So that's key to remember. In this part of Ontario, we have lots of natural foods, what we call soft mass, different cherry species, blueberries, raspberries. Later on in the summer, blackberries become important. The beaked hazel are important. If they're not eaten by small mammals first, bears will feed on them as well. And of course, in the fall, the hard mass, we talk about red oak acorns and, of course, beech nuts. And things they're subject to the climate and especially these days. Late spring frosts have a huge impact on developing natural foods, natural fruit. Of course, there's drought, increasingly drought conditions, and then subsequently forest fires. We hear about it on the news every summer, increasing amounts and more devastating effects of forest fires. So all subject to climate change. And here's an annual cycle of bear biology, and the red represents a negative energy balance, and really they're only able to put on weight generally from about mid-July until the end of October. And of course, that September-October period is when they're feeding mostly on hard mast, so acorns and beech nuts. So there's very little opportunity to gain that weight. That they'll eat, try and consume 20,000 calories a day if possible, necessary to put on that vital weight. So I'll set up this. This is a bear. This is in Algonquin Park. This is a stand we found in 1994. It seemed to be the only stand that had produced beech nuts in this particular year. We verified that later in the winter by flying helicopter moose surveys, and you can see the bear nest from the air. And this particular stand had a lot of bears. We were doing research trapping of bears in this stand, and this particular bear, I got used to me over a period of time. I'm driving down this road, this remote bush road in October, that beautiful October morning, and I see this bear up ahead, pulled over the truck over and walked up the road and was able to videotape this. Usually they're feeding on the beech nuts in September when there's still leaves on the trees. So I was really lucky to to catch this guy in the tree. This bear is well over 200 pounds. So um, let's have a look here. And we did have sound. We tried to make Yarmila and I tried to make the sound go, but it's essentially you're just hearing chipmunks in the background. And this bear is quite comfortable in this beech tree. And this is a good sized bear, well over 200 pounds. Is looking for some remaining beech nuts in this beech tree. And yes, I caught a bear in a stand at the end of September. I recaptured it 16 days later and drugged it both times, drugged it and weighed it. The second time, it had gained over 40 pounds just eating beech nuts. So that's how significant beech nuts can be. And incidentally, this is why you don't climb a tree to get away from a black bear because it's quite comfortable in the tree. And so when bears are up there feeding, they create what they call bear nests. It's not a bear nest or a nest at all. It's as high as a bear can safely go and feed and break the branches off, pull them to when they can feed on the nuts at the tips of the branches. Um, that that stand I told you about, I could sit there on a quiet morning. You could hear the branches breaking in the forest around the edges. So um, pretty amazing. And so when bears are feeding, then not only do they make evidence with bear nests, they also leave claw marks when they're climbing and descending the tree. If a bear um, alarmed or by your presence or any kind of presence, any kind of threat, they come down out of that tree amazingly fast. And when they do, it's like a fire person coming down the fire pole. They can hit the ground really fast. So when they're doing that, they're leaving all these climbing scars. This is this is only a couple of years ago. I'm getting kind of bad in that picture because I'm anticipating beech bark disease hitting these beautiful trees. Obviously this tree has been used extensively over the years. So some of them beech trees are just good nut producers and used extensively over the years. And likewise, the here's a bear nest with over 20 or 90% crown damage, and I was interested in would that tree actually survive. So the next year, I went in and took a picture, and sure enough, there's green foliage. So it doesn't make sense for ecologically a bear to be destroying its future food source, but in this case, at least this one particular tree managed to survive. So I was interested in that aspect. This is back in 1994. I marked 40 beech trees, which scientifically is not a rigorous study, but the intent was to mark trees that have been suffered 0 to 90% crown damage as a result. And the intent was to see if the bears if the trees that were damaged by bears would decline, and if so, what percentage of crown damage resulted in decline or mortality. And my idea at the time was tree markers could, identify a tree that had been, for example, hit 50% or more crown damage. Maybe they could mark that tree to be removed for forestry purposes in the future. But again, now looking back, 31 years, and we checked that particular stand, and these trees over the years, these 31 years, 25 of those original trees uh, still remain. We checked them just this past fall, and of those trees, almost all have evidence of beech scale, but none have beech bark disease so far. And I have individual trees resistance, but after hearing Nick's talk, and it seems which key is beat scale resistance. So I don't know um, if that has merit at all. That the fact that these trees in this stand don't seem to have evidence of beech bark disease. Maybe it's coming. Maybe it's a matter of time, unfortunately. And you can see this tree that I marked with a tag, and you see the fresh climbing scars and the old climbing scars. So this tree had been used multiple times over the years. And you see in the background um, bear nests all over in the stand, the stand that we had identified as being heavily used. Interestingly, no mortality could be attributed to bear foraging, but again, it wasn't a scientifically tested, rigorous study, so it just anecdotally, bears didn't seem to have declined as a result of crown damage. So why beech trees matter to bears? Well, large seed tree crops happen on average about every 2 years, but 2 to 8 years. And beech nuts contain nearly double the calories found in acorns. Um, and do bears favor beech nuts as a result? We just anecdotally again, we had a number of bears radio collared, and back in those days that we had VHF radio collars, none of these GPS collars. So if we if a bear was stationary for any length of time, we would walk in and attempt to find out what the bear was up to, what it was feeding on. And in this one case, we walked in on this bear, and you could hear this bear feeding in a beech tree. And it when they're feeding on a beech in a beech on beech nuts, they're crunching the beech nuts sounds like people eating Christmas candy. And as they crunch, they're shedding the shell of the beech nuts, and you can hear the beech nuts falling on the leaves. A pretty neat thing. Um, but all around this particular tree were acorns or oaks, and acorns just littered the ground. So obviously, this bear had favored the beech nuts and expended the energy to climb up and actively feed on those beech nuts. So another indication of how valuable beech nuts are. So here in central Ontario, our late season food sources, hard mass, are pretty limited other than beech nuts. We're mainly looking at red oak acorns. We do have bur oak, but it's in low numbers. And white oak, we're at the northern edge of white oak range here in central Ontario. So really, we're limited to red oak acorns. And this is an FRI uh, uh, um, um, tree composite for Algonquin Park. And we look at the western 2/3 of Algonquin Park, not much indication of red oaks. So that's kind of the dark green over here. The eastern third of Algonquin Park does have more red oak. So when even before presence of beech bark disease or when beech bark was declining, bears, if there was a beech nut failure, bears, radio collar bears would often move to the east side of the park to feed on acorns or outside the park where they leaves them vulnerable to hunting. So it's not a great scenario if they're feeding on just on acorns. And my successor, Micheline Mamoni, just sent me this. I asked for this graph, and she sent me this morning, and just to illustrate further implications. So if they're not beech nuts hard massed in the fall, will it lead to human bear conflicts in the future? And this is just a graph to illustrate the abundance of natural foods, wildlife foods, and the occurrence of human conflicts with bears. And you can see the dark line is the abundance of natural foods, and the green lines are the reporting at our Bearwise Center of bear conflicts. So you can see that on when wildlife foods are abundant, we have low human bear conflicts. And beech bark disease will undoubtedly lower bear recruitment in central Ontario. So they're not putting on that weight, they're not producing those cubs, and there'll be fewer bears in the landscape. So why beech trees matter to other wildlife? So we've just talked about bears, but how about other wildlife? And Madison talked about the number of species that were beech nuts were important too. So again, 40 species of birds and mammals feed on beech nuts, and over 125 species of butterflies and moths utilize beech as a host plant. And of course, the small mammal numbers will increase with beech nut production equals predator numbers. So things like marten, weasels, raptors, hawks, owls will increase as a result of small mammal numbers. So the implications are quite significant. Unknown significance to pollinators when beech are in flower. How many pollinators depend on beech nuts? So there's those kind of hidden implications that we just don't realize. And although black bears might be the poster child for beech bark disease, there are some very obscure small species, lesser known species. And in this case, the early hairstreak is a small butterfly that larvae feed on the developing beech nuts. And it's a really elusive species that feeds a lot or hangs around a lot in the treetops of beech. Um, and data show here that there strongly suggest a decline in early hair streak butterfly. Alternate host plant is beaked hazel, American beaked hazel, but is it enough to prevent a critical decline? And you can see here in Ontario, it's an S2 species. A lot of the upper states, it's critically imperiled, so it's an S1 species. So this is this little butterfly, like I said, is it could be quite significant. Its decline. Um, so overall, kind of in conclusion, overall, the loss of beech trees will have a profound and devastating impact on wildlife, making seed preservation and potential individual resistance against beech bark disease and beech leaf disease critical for the future. Um, and we don't want to end in too much of a doom and gloom scenario. So just a little quiz here. So we talked about why it's important for female black bears to put on enough weight. And if you're a male black bear, this is a male, it's critical because you have access to more breeding opportunities and more feeding opportunities. Um, this guy was caught in getting into beehives in Sudbury in September, early September, a number of years ago. But he looks like a big bear, and I usually ask this when people I have access to people can put up their phone hands. But a big bear, a big black bear, would be about 300 pounds on average, about 300 pounds. This guy was 730 pounds. So just an incredible animal. He was released after being caught in early September. It was a good acorn year. He may have approached or exceeded 800 pounds by the time he went into the den. So it is very important for male bears to be large as well. But there is a point where large is not so good. This guy is just incredibly fat bear, not feeding on natural foods. This bear was feeding in a garbage dump in Temagami area. It actually was eventually found dead at the edge of this landfill site, probably ingested something bad or maybe had a heart attack or something. So being really large is not that great for a bear of that size. So we just hope, in the absence of beech or declining beech trees, that bears will find enough natural foods one way or another to carry on. They will carry on, but to the same extent with beech nuts. And that's all I had, Marilla. Or Marilla, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Fantastic presentation and fantastic pictures. Thank you for sharing those. That for those of us like me who mostly sit behind a desk, it was really wonderful to see these in action shots. And I really appreciate you bringing to life what the ecological impact of beech being removed from the landscape have in a very real setting for a species, many species. So thank you. I'm hoping we have a lot of appreciation for your story. I'm wondering if anybody has any questions for Jeremy. Okay, thank you. So we have one question now. Given your experience, what are the primary audiences that really need to hear this message that you shared with us today?
That's a good question. Um, I mean, given the talks we heard today and we heard last week, I think this is a key audience right here. I mean, if there's hope for the continuation of beach, it would be to this kind of audience. And certainly talking to naturalist groups and so on, who interest groups like that, they definitely would appreciate this kind of a thing. But I don't know if they could necessarily make a profound difference in the future of beach, unfortunately.
Thank you, Jeremy. Anyone else for a question for Jeremy? I know that was definitely the point of having these webinars, is to definitely have this kind of cross-sectoral conversation happening so that folks can learn a little bit about some things that are a little bit beyond what they do day to day, and gain some information, but also some really good connections with people that might be able to help them in the work going forward. I have one more question for you. Are there any groups studying seed comparisons in protein and fat content? So if we're looking at
Not that I'm aware.
substitutes. Yeah.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of a particular group. Just the one slide I had with um, more calories, twice as much calories as acorns. So I don't know if there's a particular group um, that's looking at that. I'm sure in scientific data literature there might be those answers, but just that the one example of how much more calories beech nuts have than acorns.
Okay, thank you. Okay, a couple more questions have come in. In that last photo, was the bear feeding on a black walnut? And if yes, would that be toxic for the bear?
The very last slide, that's feeding on mountain ash. The bear is sitting down.
Okay. Yes, I think that was the slide.
Yeah. So that is
Okay.
mountain ash, and
Okay.
and so mountain ash would be the equivalent of a hard mast in the north for a fall food source in the boreal forest. Very important mountain ash in the
Mhm.
boreal forest. Not much, just not much on the landscape in parts of central Ontario. So.
One more question. In your experience, is there any bear preference for red oak versus white oak?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. I think there's probably more tannin in red oak, but I'm not sure about that. That's something I would definitely be interested in looking into. And again, or bur oak. I would think that just the size of a bur oak compared to a red oak acorn is quite a bit smaller. And again, we're just at the northern edge of white oak range. But with climate change, maybe those opportunities will increase in the future.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. I think we have room for one more question if anybody has. Anybody wants to pop that into the chat? Okay. Otherwise, I will thank you again, Jeremy, for sharing all that interesting and important information with our audience here today. And we'll
Thank you,
stay in
folks.
touch, I'm sure.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, folks.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to our last presentation, which is going to be brought to us by two speakers, starting with Donnie McPhee. Donnie's career with Natural Resources Canada started in the mid-1980s, working with various research teams, including the Forest Insect and Disease Survey, Atmospheric Pollution, Climate Change and the Biodiversity Network. He completed his MSc Forestry in Conservation of Forest Genetic Resources in 2001 at the University of New Brunswick. And then for the next 15 years, he teamed up with Dr. Judy Liu and researchers associated with the National Tree Seed Centre of Canada to work on the conservation of genetic resources for species of concern, including beech, ash, butternut, bur oak, and hemlock. In 2017, Donnie assumed the role of the coordinator of the NTSC, and under his guidance, the NTSC launched its Indigenous Seed Collection Program in the spring of 2022. After 35 years of service, Donnie retired from NRCan, but still maintains interest in the legacy projects. And the second presenter for this presentation will be Matthew Brophy, who completed his Master of Science in Environmental Toxicology at the University of Louisiana at Monroe in 2010. He began his career at AFC, where he spent a decade working in chemical ecology, focusing on the study of pheromones in invasive pest species. In 2020, Matthew transitioned into the field of tree seed conservation while supporting black ash collections at Canada's National Tree Seed Centre during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. This experience sparked a strong interest in seed science and conservation. Drawing on his background in biochemistry, Matthew pursued cryopreservation of recalcitrant tree seed in an area of increasing importance to long-term conservation efforts. He has since expanded his expertise through visits to leading cryopreservation laboratories in the US, and in the fall of 2025 by completing the plant cryopreservation course at the Millennium Seed Bank at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Kew. And I will stop there and hand over the microphone to Donnie and Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, we sent those long bios because we wanted to hear Jamela go on for a while.
You know, I read them, and I don't know, just being on camera trips you up. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, so really nice to be here. I think my first presentation to a group this size since I retired. Yeah, so Matt and I are going to give a little presentation. Mine's going to kind of be on the historic work that has been conducted on the Canadian Forest Service along with our partners, and then Matt will sort of wrap up with some of the newer stuff we're doing. I just want to say to start that a lot of the work that I'll be presenting was under the tutelage of Dr. Judy Lowe, who might be on the call. I sent her the invitation. And then Darren DeBroca is the new coordinator for the National Tree Seed Centre. So he would be a point of contact going forward. And then you'll see Jacob Raven. In my last 5 years with the CFS, knowing retirement was coming, I was really searching hard for someone to take on the beech work that we had conducted. But it was really difficult to find a new researcher coming into a federal department because it's such a long-term project. This is not a neat and tidy, wrap it up and get a paper out. This is something you're going to have to be invested in. So Jacob Raven is finishing up his PhD at UMB, and he actually reached out because he's very interested in beech. And it's like, yes, Jacob, you're the guy we're looking for. So hopefully Jacob will be around and he can find permanent employment where he can continue some of the work that we're doing. So a lot of the stuff that I have here between Nick earlier today and then Dave last week, a lot of the stuff we were doing in Atlantic Canada was kind of in parallel with some of the stuff they were doing. So some of those slides I'll skip through. But one thing I just wanted to point out, and Nick had a slide, that the disease did come in through the port in Halifax. We believe, and sorry, it wasn't the disease, that the fungal component has always been here, and there's multiple fungal components. but the actual scale came in through the Port of Halifax, and we believe it came on a European beech that was being planted at the Botanical Gardens in Halifax. And, that's how stuff like this kind of starts and gets moved around. But one of the things I want to point out is that you'll see until 1926, it was really just mainland Nova Scotia that we were finding beech bark disease. And then it slowly moved across. So unlike some of the newer pests and pathogens that we're seeing, Dutch elm disease, butternut canker, emerald ash borer, out west, mountain pine beetle that really are moving quickly. Beech bark disease is a very slow moving disease. So the forest that I grew up in the Maritimes, I've never known what a resistant stand looked like, or a clean beech tree. Just move along here. So you've seen some of this stuff. So this is what the fungal component looks like. This is the female here, and these are eggs that have been laid. And this is actually here, when we talk about the resistance, and that's been used a couple of times, this is the mouthpiece here, or the stylet from the female, and it's that long, skinny little, microscopic, you never even see it. That is what pierces through the bark. So a lot of the research that has gone on, and Dave talked about it last week, it's a resistant of something in the bark to allowing this basic little filament to get through. So we're not quite sure what that is, but there's something in the bark chemistry. So when the female tries to put in her stylet, it stops it. This is just another picture. This is the beech that I grew up knowing. And I grew up in Cape Breton. We actually grew up knowing beech as rock maple. And I'm not sure how that happened. It's not even the same species, but that's what all the old timers that's what you're cutting out of your woodlot, rock maple, because that's what they thought it was. Good. Yeah, and the killing front, we've already kind of talked a little bit and someone had mentioned earlier, I think actually it was just Jeremy right beforehand, about how the insect was being found. And sometimes when you find the insect, you might see little entry holes and stuff on the bark, and this is just a reaction to the tree. But this is sort of in the killing front, the fruiting bodies from the fungal component. And then, after, 5-10 years sort of thing, your whole canopy will all of a sudden die out. So when the trees are growing and they have the disease to start with, they still look nice and clean, but the fungus is in that time wrapping the tree and stopping the flow of nutrients from the root system to the crown, and then the trees die. It's only afterwards that the new forests coming up are going to look like this. So basically they're growing with the fungus, and it's just amazing when you think of these trees that there's still nutrient flow from the roots making it to a canopy. And that's going to come back. Matt's going to talk a little bit about nut production, beech nut production. And when you think of how much inhibition there is to get the energy to your fruiting bodies, it's understandable why we're not seeing massed years here in the Maritimes lately. And again, this is just a little picture here. I'm actually cutting, you can't tell, but I'm cutting an epicormic shoot off this beech because that's sort of our best luck with grafting. And that's when I was young and handsome back in the day. I wanted to throw this slide up under Dr. Judy Lowe's tutelage. It was 1998 when we started the first program. We had a couple of students, Kirk Ellis was on, and then we had grad students, Jamie Simpson, Nella Ramirez, and myself. And right up to 2010, we were working pretty hard on beech. At that time, though, in 2010, Judy left us for greener pastures. She moved on to the Center for Biodiversity in Rome. And when she left, the funding kind of dried up. So since 2010, anything that's been done on beech with our department here really was off the side of my desk. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. But we're going to get into some of the stuff here. We're going to quickly go through. We tried a lot of stuff. So if you're interested in working with beech and you're interested in doing grafting or rooted cuttings, please reach out, because we tried almost everything you could, from, again, and you would think because if you take a root off a root tree, dig it up, we could easily get little shoots coming up, but we couldn't overwinter anything. And we had many different researchers, using hydroponics, different rooting hormones, all kinds of things, but we just couldn't get anything to last over the winter. So that kind of all led us to working with Jennifer Koch in Ohio and Dave, and that would fall under the same work that Nick was talking about they were working on. And this was grafting using hot callus grafting. So this is our setup in our greenhouses, but I went and spent a week in Ohio working with Dave to pick up these techniques. They did talk about the wax. It's a paraffin wax. So after you do your graft, you dip the whole thing in a paraffin wax. And that, I know Nick had talked about, it just prevents moisture loss. And then the leaves bud out of that. So we had really good success using hot callus grafting. The other part is what we did not test our mature trees in the field, as Nick was talking about in his presentation. Instead, we decided, because at the same time we were getting success with our hot callus grafting, that we would just test in the greenhouse. But again, this is collecting the scale, and there's an art form to all of this, because you have to collect actually these females at the time when they're ready to lay eggs. You bring in the lab, they lay their eggs, you scrape the eggs. We would count 300 onto a little piece of foam and then wrap that foam onto the scion, and then come back the next year and see, did any of these adults survive or not? Really quickly here, this is something Marek Kachowski, the late Marek Kachowski, unfortunately, we published a little article because I think it was a 2011 or 12. So these are different grafts from punitively resistant trees in nature, out in the woods. We collected grafts. So this one shows we collected 12 grafts, and when we tested them, all of them appeared to be resistant. All of the eggs or the females died in that little wrapping. But there were other trees, like R5 here. We had 12 grafts, and 3 of the 12 grafts, actually, the female insect did survive, when on the rest of them, they died. So it's not clear cut exactly why that happened. There was only one of all of these grafts that had high levels of infections, but we still did have infections. Yeah, so all those grafts got outplanted with our partners at national parks. So again, this is at Funday National Park. We divided up all of our grafts that we were successful with. I'll get to the numbers later on, but this is just to give you a real quick view. All these sites were fenced off, dug up, everything was staked. And these are some, at the bottom here, some pictures from, I think, 4 years ago. So we're getting some good growth there. No signs of seed production yet at that site. Prince Edward Island. I left this little graft here. I got it from PEI. When we planted at Parks Canada, again, there was no money. Everyone was kind of, okay, here's your trees, plant them, hope you take care of them. And each of the parks, again, since that time, in the last 16 years, staff have come and go. So at different parks, they're measuring different things. So I was looking at this graph that I received 2 days ago and going, oh, I wonder what this means. Well, I guess 39 of the grafts have died. 40 of them are small still, but 18 of them are over 3 meters tall. But each park has kind of been doing their own thing. But spurred by being invited to this talk, it's really kind of rejuvenated me. So I'm planning to visit all these parks and try to get everybody lined up so we're measuring the same things, looking at the same things coming up this summer. At Kedji, same thing. And this is just an example of the fencing that was put in. I mean, lots of money invested into protecting these from deer browsing and stuff. And I think in the next picture here, so this is the picture here, of the tree from last summer. So we're getting really good growth, and they actually are starting to produce seed. Something else I wanted to mention, all of these sites at the parks were put in areas where beech is not So basically, we went into a conifer stand, cleared the conifer out, fenced it in so we wouldn't get pollen coming in from surrounded areas. So we were pretty confident that the pollen would be within that stand. Not doom and gloom. I'm getting my doom and gloom. I know Nick left it to the end, but you guys don't have this little fella here. So this is another insect problem we're having. This is the beech leaf mining weevil, first noted in Nova Scotia in 2011, and unfortunately, it has made its way to the national park, which is only a couple 100 kilometers away in Kedji. But yeah, another beech problem. I won't go into that. Yeah. So we have our grass, but then we also wanted to look at control crossing. So in 2009, I believe it was, maybe a little earlier, we started doing some control crossing. So basically using a bucket truck, getting up in the canopy, we would already have collected the pollen. So we would collect branches, force that pollen in a greenhouse, then take that pollen out and actually do the pollinations and then bag the flowers afterwards. And we had pretty good results. We got, so resistant times resistant, we had 22 crosses and we got 976 seed produced out of that, or seedlings. For resistant times susceptible, so that would be resistant female flowers with susceptible male pollen. So basically disease pollen. Again, 11 crosses for 385. And then our control was susceptible times susceptible, and we got 120. So this work was really started, that says 2004. That would have been our original stuff, but we really didn't get to outplant any of this stuff until 2011. And that was the year after Judy left. So without any funding, kind of reached out to our own research forest. And then I was doing some other work with Butternut with CFB Gagetown, and we got 2 sites. Beech, again, does not do really well when you're planting seedlings out in open fields. So we did an understory planting. I think the next site might show this, or oh, I guess that comes up the next picture after this. So this is another, yeah, I'm going to skip over this little slide for now. We might come back to it later. So in the control cross, yeah, this is kind of what our sites look like. And this is kind of a picture from 3 years ago. We're getting some good growth in there. But we did lose a lot of those plantings. And it wasn't due to beech bark disease. It was due to browsing a lot of it. We had a couple of hurricanes come through and blow over mature trees, crushing our seedlings. But we do have some good material still left if anyone's going forward to work with. This is just another picture at CFB Gagetown. But for those 2 sites, we have about 30% survival after it's 15 years now. So we still have 316 clean crosses to work with, another 243 clean time disease crosses, and then our control, not a whole lot, but 38. And I'm kind of just putting this out there again, hoping to spur some interest out there to other people who might want to help pick this up. Again, we do have some commitments from Darren DeProca and the National Tree Seed Center staff to help us get out and do a reassessment of a lot of these sites in the coming years. We did try, so the control crosses to do inoculations, doing that in the field, like you saw in that slide by Nick, doing it on mature trees where you're above the snowpack and stuff, so you can do it. We attempted to do it on seedlings in the field, but with snowpack and just melting and stuff, we got results, but we couldn't be sure that the insects just weren't drowning in water with that foam on them. So a lot of effort went in, and again, this was off the side of the table, sort of doing it without any funding. We really didn't have any results to report on that. Just a couple more slides. So something else, just working with beech, all the literature, again, from Dave Houston, who was kind of the pioneer of a lot of the beech research in the East, was saying that your chances of finding beech are like about 1% of all the stems you're going to find in a stand. But I really found working here in New Brunswick that I thought it was a little bit higher than that. So we did a survey, and we published a paper back in, I think it was 2013. So basically, looking at the historic movement of beech, we wanted to count mainland Nova Scotia. So that would be prior to, 80 years after the infection that we went back and looked. And then you got 1935 and 1950, and then up here in northern New Brunswick, which was still being infected. It was only 1975 where this part of the province where beech bark disease moved to. And our results actually did sort of show that in mainland Nova Scotia, about 2% of all the stems that we found. So we did a 1 kilometer transect measuring everything on either side by 2 meters. So it's basically a 4 meter swath for 1 kilometer through stands that had at least 33% beech. And what we were finding was about 2% in Nova Scotia, southern New Brunswick, PEI, and Cape Breton. But when you get up into this area that's being affected a little less, we were actually getting over 4.2%. And in the northern part of the province, we were still finding over between 5 and 6% of all the stems were clean. So what that means is that I don't think you want to jump the gun, because you still can get escapees. This part of the province, up until really the early 90s, was still receiving temperatures minus 30 degrees multiple days, and that's enough to keep knocking and hammering back those insect populations. So even though we are seeing, close to 6% clean up here, I'm not confident as of yet that that's the true number. It probably is closer to what Dave's numbers are, say a little bit more, 2%. And just 2 more slides here, then we're going to hand it over to Matt. And Matt's presentation will be a lot more happy, I'm sure, with the work he's doing. But just some of the locations. So again, we're located here in Fredericton on the Holistic River, on the traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, and Passamaquoddy. As are all of our lands here in the Maritimes. But this is our Acadia Research Forest, where we have the controlled crosses, CFB Gagetown control crosses, and then our 3 national parks where the grafts are outplanted. So again, just a quick acknowledgement to our partners, Parks Canada. All of these, Judy, Kathleen, Sharon, Lori, Terry, have all retired and moved on. In the US, again, we based a lot of our work on Dave, and then working in collaboration with Jennifer and Dave Carney. Mara Kachowski was a big part, our grad students. The funding model for us provided a lot of the funding, and then CFB Gagetown site. So now we're gonna move on to the happy stuff here, the National Tree Seed Center. So for those who don't know, again, the National Tree Seed Center, we do a lot of work with our partners at the FGCA. Be lost without them in Ontario. But it originated in 1967, and its origins then really was working with commercial species. But in 2000, which again lines right up when we started the beech work, really moved to conservation of forest genetic resources. So all the work we were kind of doing on beech was in collaboration with Dale Simpson and the National Tree Seed Center. But our priority is to conserve and work on species at risk. There are 720 plus tree and shrub species in Canada, and the mandate of the Seed Center is to have collections of all of those seed from each ecoregion that they sort of exist in conservation for research, but also for reestablishment down the road. And with that, I'll slide out of my seat and let Matt take a chair.
Okay. The show. All right, on to my part. So I'm going to be talking seed and the potential for long-term storage. So most of the seed at the NTSC is stored in -20 freezers. However, these are our liquid nitrogen tanks that we have in our cryo lab. And that's where we hold seed that might not live long or can't be stored at all in a -20 freezer. So I will get into that. So just want to go over some basic concepts in seed storage. There are 3 types of storage behavior that we categorize seeds. Orthodox, or the normal seed storage behavior, means that seed from a given species can be dried down below 10% moisture content, generally in the range of 4 to 8% moisture content, and it then can be stored in a -20 freezer. This includes most Canadian tree species, so we're lucky that way. But then we have the intermediate storage behavior, which means the seed can be dried down, but then doesn't last very long in storage. That might include willows or white bark pine. There's a little bit of debate in how you categorize these species, but then lastly, we have the recalcitrant category. So seeds of species in this category cannot be dried down without losing viability, and so they cannot be stored under freezing temperatures, as ice will then form and kill the seed. So globally, oaks are kind of the biggest challenge when it comes to storing germplasm, but American beech might also fall under this category. We like to place things in neat boxes, but really this is more of a spectrum, with species like jack pine being firmly in orthodox and oaks being firmly in recalcitrant, and a lot of the others kind of, it depends who you talk to. So to sum up the challenges, it's not all good news, as Donnie might have said from me. There are quite a few challenges when it comes to beech seed, and he also mentioned masting years. So the FGCA seed manual mentions 2 to 3 years between masting years, but really we're not seeing that. I've been working in seed now for 6 years, and I've not seen one. I don't know when the last one was in the Maritimes. Do you recall? We don't know. So just getting good quality seed is a challenge. And like he said, it's because of that beech bark disease, you can't get that nutrient flow up to the canopy, and they're not developing seed like they might have in a healthy stand. As you can see from the images I have on this slide, you might think you have a nice collection of beech nuts, but once we take a closer look with our X-ray, you can see that almost all the seed is empty. So this is the kind of collection that we've been getting recently. So getting good quality seed is certainly an issue, and couple that with the behavior of beech seed, we have a bit of a challenge. Historically, we've only stored beech in a +4 refrigeration at like a high moisture content, and you can keep them for maybe 2 years at most. And being a fairly large seed, it has a very high lipid content, and then so lipids in storage will still have lipid oxidation even at -20, which creates free radicals and reactive oxygen species that cause aging in the seed. The only good news I have going into my next section is that in 1990, Valerie Pence, a really well-known researcher in this field, published a limited study where she was able to take embryonic axes from beech, freeze them in liquid nitrogen, and then saw some hypocoidal elongation and the beginning of shoot growth. So there is a chance that we can freeze these and recover them. So in all seed storage, we want to avoid ice formation inside the cells of the seed. And we do this by achieving what's called vitrification. That's a state in which the aqueous portion of the seed has formed what is called a glassy state. So it's neither a solid or a liquid, it's more of a jello type substance. And you can see in the image on the left is a vitrified drop of water. On the right is a frozen drop of water. They're both frozen, but the frozen drop of water has formed ice. So you can tell the difference. And so in orthodox seeds, we can get vitrification simply by removing water, drying them down to the point that the solute concentration rapidly increases, and then you get a really rapid increase in viscosity. And so that's basically vitrification. But how do we get there in recalcitrant seed if we can't dry them? So this is where the liquid nitrogen comes into play. By partially drying and plunging seeds in liquid nitrogen at -196 degrees Celsius, we can bypass those freezing events that would most likely take place in storage at -18, 20 degrees Celsius. And you get that vitrification of your aqueous solutions. If that fails, then we might move on to using cryoprotectants. They can help to replace water inside the seed and then prevent ice formation. But in the case of beech, I don't think we're going to need to go that route. So in 2023, the NTSC was donated some beech seed from Parks Canada, the Cape Breton Highlands National Park, and from Kerry National Park to help develop a storage protocol for this challenging species. So I took seed from 5 different sections and subjected them to 5 distinct drying times of 0, 2, 4, 6, and 24 hours. So that's just putting them on drying racks in our drying room. I then took 10 seeds from each accession at each drying point and then used that for moisture content determination. And then I split the remaining 100 seeds per accession per drying time for 50 that would be foil sealed, placed in liquid nitrogen overnight, and then 50 control seeds that were just held at +4 overnight. And then we germinated all those seeds using the protocol listed there. And actually, in that image, there's a little bit of foreshadowing. There on the label, you see this fraction was exposed to liquid nitrogen, and it was dried for 24 hours, and you can actually see a radical starting to emerge. So that's the first signs of life after freezing. So the results are very promising. It is generally assumed that if a species can survive short-term exposure to liquid nitrogen, that it can likely live a long time in cryostorage. That will need to be tested, obviously, but we actually had survival in all but one seed lot. Now, going back to the poor quality seed that is produced by beech these days, you can see the germination was not great on the bottom 5 graphs of the 5 seed lots. So the orange bars are representing the fraction of seeds that were exposed to liquid nitrogen. And as you can see, as you're moving into more drying, the 24-hour drying point is on the far right in each one of those graphs. You can see that there's actually recovery starting to happen. Some germination in that fraction exposed to liquid nitrogen. And on the top right graph is basically all 5 accessions averaged out. And so you can see that we were starting to recover after 24 hours of drying. We're getting pretty close to those control values, and we aren't really seeing a dip in the controls germination. So we haven't really hit a point where desiccation injury is a problem. So the question is, can we dry them further and get that recovery all the way up to control so we're not losing any genetics when we're storing them long term? So current work, we were able to get one good collection of beech this past fall in New Brunswick to play with. So we're doing some in vitro germination protocol development, which is more or less finalized at this point. We tried a few different explant types, essentially looking to see how much cotyledon material we could take away and still get good normal germination. And basically we can remove almost all the cotyledon. So that cotyledon is a few things. It's a source of problems down the line in storage, and that the lipid oxidation produces these harmful products. But it also saves a lot of space. And in cryogenics and liquid nitrogen, space is kind of a premium. So we can fit a lot more of these nuts in if we remove all the cotyledon material. I will then in the next coming weeks, I'll be using lithium chloride solutions in sealed containers to create exact RH environments, relative humidity environments, to dry these explants to target moisture contents. And that will answer the question of where can we get optimal survival without losing viability from desiccation to injury. So, and we also want to do some transplanting into the greenhouse to make sure that these can produce healthy plants. So those are the plans for the next coming couple months. And that's pretty much it. So thanks to the parks, and also if you have any trees showing resistance to beech bark disease and are making good seed and you'd like to donate to the industry, please reach out. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Donnie and Matt. That was super interesting and a great compliment to the other work that was presented today. So I guess I didn't realize how long the East Coast has been dealing with beech bark disease. It was really interesting to hear that. So thank you. And anyone have any questions, please put them into the chat. I'd love to hear from you and your thoughts. There was a comment earlier, I think shortly after Donnie's presentation, about sort of it'd be interesting to do some genetic testing on beech in Quebec. So not sure if that's been done.
As far as I know, there hasn't been a lot done in Quebec. So something I didn't produce is that the resistant trees that we found in the Maritimes, we did do, and this is again back in the early 2000s, some isozyme work, because we wanted to see, isozyme is just basically the easiest genetic diversity test you can do. And we just wanted to see if things were matching up, because our concern is that all the resistant trees were going to match identically protein wise, like what's in them, but that wasn't the case. So that was very good that there was quite a bit of genetic diversity within the trees that we were finding. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. We have a question for you. Great to see NTSC doing this work. Is the CFS supporting your research, Matt, or does this connect with any university programs in Canada?
Yeah, so like Donnie mentioned, a lot of our current beech work is side of the desk work, but really because of the great work that Donnie did and developing the Seed Center, we have a lot more help in the lab now, and it frees me up time-wise. So I have had the time to do a little more work recently, but funding-wise, it's kind of, just whatever we have for money from other projects.
Quick follow-up. Donnie, what is your advice to practitioners working in beech-dominated stands in Canada at this point in time, given the fact that we do have options to work with?
Wow, Kerry, thank you. Yeah, I don't know what the advice is. I know, yeah, Kerry, I really don't know like where to go with this. And mainly, and it's not beech bark. It was just beech bark disease that we were battling with, but it's not. And that leaf, the weevil that's coming in here, that's in Nova Scotia now, it's really taking the winds out of the sight. Like I know in certain like forest, you talk to foresters and stuff, and I know I was talking to John Sweeney, an entomologist who works on a lot of these insects, and he will say, yeah, that you talk to the general forester, and they're so discouraged with the state of our beech that they just want it gone. I really do think, the work that Matt's doing with cryo, because if we can find some resistant strains of beech and we can find a way to propagate them and get them back out in the landscape, I think that's, the way to go. The problem with, most of the harvesting techniques that we use, we're going to cut down a beech stand. If you cut one disease tree, you get 100 disease root sprouts coming up. It's the same with the resistant trees, though. So one of the things I didn't mention, really notice when we're doing our survey, is that stands that had been cut, say back in the 50 years ago, you could almost still find like a root system, and all of the resistant trees that was finding were coming off that root system. So if there was a way of, if you do find a clear tree, not that you want to cut it down, but root scarring, we always thought, like finding the root system, doing root scars and getting natural sprouting coming off those would increase the amount of clean in your property. Kind of rambling on here, which I can do.
No, it's all good. People are interested. I have another question. Are you specifically looking for seeds from the Maritimes or from other provinces as well?
Oh, sure. We'll accept from any province. Yeah, we're the National Tree Seed Center. So yeah, any province we would like to focus on resistant trees, but yeah, location is not as important.
Okay. Great.
About the weevil.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really don't know a lot. I don't know. There's John Sweeney. John is the guy to talk about it. I just saw he put a comment. John is the man to talk about the weevil if he wanted to pop on, if someone's interested.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead, John. You can just unmute yourself if you're willing.
Hi. Yeah, I just put a thing in the chat there. I can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So just to say that I don't want to be super discouraging, but yeah, this beech leaf mining weevil, which has probably been in Nova Scotia since possibly as early as like 2007. We didn't discover it till 2011, but it's really spread over much of Nova Scotia. It's now in New Brunswick and PEI, and we've done some impact plots in it there, and it's killing. Well, it's probably not killing. It's weakening the trees by basically defoliating them every year, and then they put on a second flush and get weaker and weaker, and they're probably taken out by root and butt diseases. But we're seeing up to 99% mortality of the beech, the mature beech in stands where it's been for like 7 years or so. And so and the numbers just don't seem to be dropping. I've got a great video that Corey Hughes took in Point Pleasant Park there about 3 years ago, just beating a beech branch. This was actually European beech, because it will go on the European beech as well. It's from Europe. And just hundreds and hundreds of little tiny weevils, only about 2 millimeters long, dropping onto a beating tray, just beating a few branches. So the numbers are super high. Parasitism rate is very low compared to Europe. And it appears that American beech is much more susceptible to basically leaf necrosis caused by the adults, we think, in the spring, compared to European beech. So, and it is known for European beech, the weevils, an occasional pest. When the weevil has an outbreak on European beech, there's no mass produced, so it affects the production of beech nuts. So another bad thing about the weevil is that it likes to overwinter in cracks and crevices, which are far more prevalent on cankered beech, but it does just fine on almost any other species in the stands. So there's lots of weevils on species like red spruce, which is a primary forest timber species in the Maritimes. And so it can easily get moved by people and logs and firewood. So high risk of spread by people, and a lot of mortality.
Thank you, John. There's one other question that I missed earlier. Going back to the resistant trees that you found in your surveys, did those appear to be clonal? For example, root suckers from resistant trees or individuals?
So that was in the survey. I would say a lot of them were clonal coming off roots. But for all the work we've done with our grafting, our control crosses, we were selecting trees that were geographically well spread, so that we were not using clonal material, that we're using genetically differentiated trees.
Great, thank you. So another question, is Canada investigating potential predators that feed on the weevil, as has been done with other invasives?
I can answer that. It's John Sweeney speaking again. We had Cabby International in Switzerland do a 2-year study looking for parasitoids that could be potentially suitable candidates for classical biocontrol of the weevil. They identified, there's actually one parasitoid that parasitizes the adult weevil, which looked like a good candidate. Most of the ones that they found, and they found parasitic levels, exceeding 50% in parts of France and Switzerland. Easily about 20 different parasitoids. Most of them are generalists, though. Most parasitoids of leaf miners or generalists would not be suitable for introduction. But they did find some in the 2-year study. Unfortunately, when we were prepared to go and say, okay, let's go for another contract where you could look into that a little bit further, hemlock woolly adelgid was discovered in Nova Scotia. And with only limited resources to look at invasive species and whatnot, beech weevil fell in priority to hemlock woolly adelgid, and we no longer had any money to pursue it. We are doing a field trial this spring, testing 3 systemic insecticides to see if they will actually prevent the damage that the weevil's causing. But that would not be any kind of forest level solution to anything. It'd be something like people could maybe try to conserve some select beech trees, or for example, the beech seed orchard in Kejimkujik Park, which is probably threatened by the weevil right now in terms of mass production. So anyway, that answers that question.
Thank you. There's a comment in the chat saying that perhaps the best thing we can do for conservation is stricter shipping / import regulations. for the future.
Yes, and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency did a risk assessment for the weevil way back when it was first discovered. And what they usually do is then regulate the movement of material that could be infested out of areas where that's known to exist into areas where it's not known to be. They kind of concluded that they didn't think they would be able to regulate its movement. It's not a currently regulated non-native species by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your presentation again, Donnie and Matt. I'd like to open the floor up for questions for all of the speakers now that everybody's heard everybody and sees sort of how everything is interrelated. If there are any more questions that have come up, any comments that people have thought when they were listening to each other, listening to the other presentations, I'd welcome any new questions to the floor. Jeremy, there was a question in the chat for you, which you commented on quickly, but I'm wondering if there's anything else you would like to add to that. The question was, if bears are being monitored regularly, could researchers monitor bear paws for nematode presence or DNA? Would that have any value?
Yeah, I suppose it's possible. As far as handling bears or taking swabs or whatever it might be, that would I would think it'd be entirely possible to do that. It's just a matter of is the analysis possible, and then maybe who would do that? That would be my question. An interesting idea, though.
Thank you. Keep it open for a minute or two longer if people have additional questions.
Well, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I wrote down something when Nick was talking, and it had to do, I think he mentioned something or alluded to the soils needed for growing beech seed. And I just want to say we found the same thing, that using just normal potting soil to grow beech does not work very well. We had to go out and actually dig up forest soils from a beech stand and mix it into our potting soil. And that really helped improve the growth and development of our beech. And I don't know if that's common for other species, but yeah, that's something we had to do. And the other one going on is that this whole seed issue. If you want to do grafting, you'll notice do the hot callus grafting. We needed 4-year-old rootstock. So if you had in your plans to do any grafting, it's collect the seed, grow your seedlings, because no one's out there growing beech seed to use as rootstock. It really is a long term. You got to have a long vision here to get into this.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those observations. Interesting. Okay, a couple of other questions have trickled in. Jeremy, back to you. In the boreal where there are fewer nut trees, what food sources do bears rely on? And then the second part, with climate change and the potential for more nut trees moving north, could that help fill the gap of beech loss for bears?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, in the boreal forest, it's primarily as far as fall foods, blueberries can last well into the fall if there's a good beech or blueberry crop, which does happen. They'll last right up until frost in September or October, so they can provide a significant fall food source. But other than that, it is a mountain ash, primarily mountain ash. And when we get to northwestern Ontario, there are oak trees or oak species that provide some food too. But that's a good question with climate change. I think Liz Cobb had a question about white oak, and I think white oak maybe would has the potential of establishing more northward progression with climate change. But I don't know about some of these other species, hickories and so on. I just don't know. But that, we're, thinking along those lines is that's what we should be doing.
Thank you. Question for Matt. Are you testing beech nuts for nematodes? And yes, would
Yeah,
that
no,
be a
we're not testing
consideration
them.
when you're accepting donations?
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, I was already reading the question ahead. No, we're not doing any testing for nematodes. Perhaps it's a good idea.
Mhm.
I also don't know that they would survive liquid nitrogen. Yeah, as the post cryo, they probably would not be around. Yeah, I don't know. We don't do any testing for nematodes. Is there an easy test that we could take on, or is it normally sent to a lab that does the testing for nematodes?
I believe Sharon Reed's lab in at Ofri in Sault Ste. Marie, she's doing a lot of the testing, but yeah, I don't know if it's just movement of stuff, we're talking about it, and if people that
Right.
we would teach collectors to be conscious of not this level of detail, but careful
Hmm.
how you're packaging and that kind of thing might be something we would want to communicate, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
wouldn't want to add to the
Also,
problem, that's for certain.
yeah. Yeah. I'm also removing the mesocarp, so perhaps I should be autoclaving my my junk, my discards. No. No. No.
Thank you. Um, So one more question here. There's a notion to give up on beech due to the resource cost required to save beech trees. Are we at that point? For all presenters to chime in on.
Wait for it, Donnie.
Yeah, yeah, I can take a stab at it, but when we think of a lot of these pests and pathogens that are, they're coming in from wherever they're coming in from, they have similar forests that have adapted over time. It's just that in our lifetime, yeah, it might be, a little bit of head banging, and it might not, we might not come up with all the answers. But I think keeping beech on the landscape so that it has time to evolve with these pests and pathogens. Someone talked about importing, John talked about importing wasps and stuff for the beech leaf weevil. Well, eventually nature comes to a balance. We've seen that in almost all species that are here. Um, so, I think it is as someone who's been involved with beech for, I guess it's 27 years, and seeing where we're at, and then listening to Nick talk about their graphs and, having to cut them down because of regulations and stuff. It can be frustrating, but um, I still think there's great value in knowing and trying to promote healthy beach on the landscape.
Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, I don't think it's every time to give up on a species. I mean, I think we have to be cognizant of the costs involved and what it would take to develop resistant seed sources and screen them, propagation and all that. But I don't think it's time to give up.
Good. Any other final questions or thoughts? This has been a really wonderful session. I really appreciate everyone's time. Of course, our presenters sharing their experience and expertise and thoughts for the future, but everyone for joining us today for this conversation. It's not going to end here, I'm sure. We are definitely going to be following up with the recordings for both sessions, and we'll let you know when those are available. So please stay tuned for those, and we look forward to keeping in touch with everyone and keeping the conversation going on American Beech. So thank you once more, and have a wonderful rest of your day.